Hi, everybody. Welcome. My name is Lauren McKenzie. I'm here today to talk to you as part of Jumpstart 2020 about the foundations of critical thinking. So let me just give you a little bit of information about what I do at St. Mary's. My role at the Writing Center is academic learning specialist for international students or non-native English speaking students. So a lot of my work requires my sort of intercultural interaction with people from all over the world. You can imagine how interesting and dynamic my job is as a result of that. So the reason that I thought foundations of critical thinking might be useful for you as incoming St. Mary's students is because more and more critical thinking is becoming the sort of catchphrase or catch term of a lot of our academic assignments. So what you will find is that when you're given your course outline, you're given a number of assignments, and often those assignments start with, think critically about this article, or through the process of critical thinking, write an essay that responds to this material from the course. It is an integral, necessary part of our academic lives, but we don't always get a lot of time to develop these skills separate from our work, right? It's sort of baptism by fire. Like we're thrown in and we're expected to be great critical thinkers. And I have a lot of sort of questioning faces when I talk to my students. I also teach at St. Mary's. Um, I often get a lot of looks of consternation or confusion or unsureness when I ask people to think critically. And I thought to myself, I'm asking a lot here, and I know that. But not only am I asking a lot, I may be asking for something that I'm not clearly defining for my students, or is not clearly defined to them. So I want to talk today about some of those really clear elements or aspects or parts of critical thinking that are going to help you when when a professor says, think critically about your coursework. You say, okay, great, I know what that means, instead of whatever. I've got a ton of work to do. I don't know how I'm going to get through it all. Don't tell me how to think. I just have to read, consume, right? But I like to try to make the process of reading and consuming information a little more efficient by thinking critically as I do it. But, that takes time. So I'm going to share my screen with you. We're going to talk about some of those really specific aspects of critical thinking. And hopefully you will have an opportunity to do a little bit of critical thinking of your own during this presentation. And you can always get in touch with me. I'm at the Writing Center. It's lauren.mckenzie@smu.ca. And of course, all of that will be available here for you in print as well, so that you can find me. I'm very easy to find at St. Mary's, okay? I'm going to share my screen. Here we are. Sorry, let's take it back to the beginning. Okay. So foundations of critical thinking. Now, I don't assume that that this is new to you. you are critical thinkers now. However, you may not have had a lot of opportunity to critically think in school as part of your coursework. So I say anyone who has made a significant purchase, if you have bought yourself an iPhone, if you have bought yourself a nice pair of sunglasses, if you have purchased yourself a new pair of Air Force sneakers or a car, you are a critical thinker. That means you saw advertising, you read reviews, you talked to friends, family, maybe someone you saw on the street who had something you were interested in purchasing, and ask them, how does that work for you? Do you like that? How much did you pay for that? You're researching prices, sales. This is all critical thinking, right? But we apply this, in ways that serve us as consumers. Now it's time to see us as consumers of ideas and consumers of opinions. And sure, some of those are easy to agree with, or easy to see the relevance and good research. But there are lots of ideas and opinions out there that need more attention from us, that need more questioning from us. So in our session today, we're going to talk about why we think critically. Why bother? Part two is how do we do that? So thinking about some of the questions that a critical thinker asks of themselves and of the material. And then in part three, I'm going to show you an activity. And of course, we won't be able to do the activity here today. We're not together, but I hope that it sort of illustrates or shows you some of those processes that we have to go through. Okay, so the purpose of critical thinking is to deepen our understanding of a topic, right? Just like I wanted to learn everything about Volkswagen before I bought my first car. I need to deepen my understanding of not just the one idea or one theory, but deepen my understanding of the landscape of ideas that exist in my subject, whether I'm doing mathematics, business, psychology, creative writing, whatever it is. Critical thinking is going to serve me deepen my understanding of the field. What do experts say? What do people say? What are the conversations? We're going to make connections. We're going to make connections between this author's theory or idea and this author's theory and idea. See how they complement each other. See how they then may actually conflict or disagree with each other. And that's okay. It happens all the time. So as young academics, our job is to say, this theorist says this one says this is where they overlap or are similar, and this is how they diverge. And that's it. It's that bringing awareness, right? If people don't agree with each other, that's why we're here. We're here to disagree with each other, right? And that's great. And recognizing those points of departure or divergence in ideas is really important in critical thinking. And that allows us then to consider alternatives. Okay, so no one person gets the final say, right? We are mere mortals. We are just human beings. Not any one of us gets the final word on anything. So we need to consider the alternatives and consider what else is out there. Finally, the reason we critically think is because we have to. That is really the currency of academia, is asking questions, identifying good support, identifying weak support for arguments, looking at the research and the process of other thinkers. This is what we do. So I encourage you to get on board. Okay, so how do we think critically? You know, when it comes to thinking critically, I don't want to reduce. I don't want to reduce critical thinking, but I do want to simplify it for you. And and to simplify it, when I consider what is the most sort of basic meaning of critical thinking, and that is really going beyond what we're told, going past the text, asking ourselves, who is the audience? Who is the author? Why are they telling me this? What do they want me to think? What do they want me to take away? So identifying a main idea of an author isn't just the topic, it's what does an author, and this can be an author of a written text, of a spoken text, whatever. What is that author's take? What is their perspective on this topic? Remember, no one gets the final word, right? So we do that through asking critical questions. And critical questions, sometimes the word critical is posited as a sort of a negative, like don't criticize, or being critical could seem as being judgmental or being difficult. But what critical means here is necessary. No emotion involved. What are the necessary questions? So being inquisitive, asking questions means going past the text to identify what is behind it. Everything from the author's perspective to the research, the way data was collected, the whole aspect. And of course, I ask different questions according to the text, right? So if I'm looking at a newspaper article, my questions may be different than if I'm looking at a primary research done by a group of scientists. Now, the questions may be different, and that's okay, but I'm asking critical questions in every scenario. Critical questions means asking the right question from the right person at the right time. And you're doing this for the right reason. Okay, so, being curious is a wonderful trait, very important characteristic for academics and for university students and professors. But being inquisitive is sort of the next level up. And that means knowing what is required of you. Being inquisitive means having a sense of what those critical questions are and the kinds of questions that your professor is going to be asking you about the text. Looking through your text, and a text, I use this word interchangeably. So a text can be a written text or a spoken text. It could be a YouTube video. It could be an interview you hear on the radio. It can be a journal article or a book. So it all qualifies as a text. So it means looking at your text through a filter of curiosity. Who is the author? Now we see a name, but based on an easy sort of Google search, we can find what kind of publications, what kind of work does this author do? How are they positioned in this topic? What can I expect from them? Most importantly, what is their perspective? Where are they coming from? Who are they? Is this a university educated older woman from South Asia, or is this a young Canadian immigrant student in high school in Toronto? You can imagine the perspectives would be different. Both completely legitimate, right? Our experiences are important, and at university and at St. Mary's, we really value diversity in our students. And that means a diversity in experiences and backgrounds, where you come from, what you think, what you believe. That is what makes our community very dynamic at St. Mary's. So when we talk about bias, bias is not a negative. Bias is the most natural thing that develops in us individually based on our experiences and our background and education. We'll talk a little more about bias, but I want you to think, if this word sort of creates a negative reaction in you, like, oh, I don't have bias. Of course you do. And I do as well. But being aware of your bias is a really great way to open up your world, right? Open up your world to other people's perspectives. And really, I prefer to use the word perspective when I am talking about bias, but you can see how they are slightly different. Maybe bias talks a little more specifically about those things we may miss because of our personal experiences, right? I have a lot of arguments with my father about, we talk a lot about gender studies, gender roles. And based on my experience, this is part of my bias, part of my perspective is how is gender treated? How is gender discussed? What are the issues related to gender? Whereas to my father, he's like, this has nothing to do with gender. And I'm like, this is very interesting, Dad. Let me tell you a few things, So it just shows that our perspectives are unique, and that's wonderful. But being aware of where your perspective comes from is academic. Okay, so I want to show you briefly the sort of questions that you can ask of yourself, you can ask of people that you interact with, professors, authors, creators, about bias. So let's have a look here. Okay, so this is an activity that I do with students, and I typically cover 3 topics, and you'll see here that the topic here is work. We also talk about education, and we talk about marriage as topics. Now you'll see on the left-hand column here, we have a number of lenses. So that is, how does age impact the way you see work? How does economic status impact the way you see work? Another lens is education, your level of education, your type of education. Another is gender. And finally, cultural norms and expectations. So before we look at these in a little more detail, I just want to mention that there are many, many, many lenses with which we see the world. Another lens could be political beliefs. Are you more conservative or more liberal? That can act as a lens. Another lens could be religion. Are you a spiritual or religious person? That as well can be a lens with which you bring in and process information in your life. So I really encourage you to see this list here, age, economic status, these lenses, as not complete. These are just some broad categories. So when we talk about age, I want you to think about how age affects perspectives or bias on work, and think about the generations of your family. Do your grandparents or great-grandparents versus your parents, you, perhaps your children, do people have different perspectives on work? I know my grandfather's perspective on work was basically 24/7. And that is an acceptable amount of work. In my life, in my generation, we look for a little bit more of a balance of work life. We want to have more fun. Now, this indicates, I mean, of course, a trend. As I get older, my ideas about work may change, but also it indicates how our age can shape the world around us. So our economic status is similar. Whether you come from a high economic or high income household or a low economic or low income household, does one's economic status influence the way they see work? Is work more or less important? If you're born into a family where you never have to work, maybe you have a trust fund and you'll never have to work. So is work important to you? Maybe some kind of work is, but maybe different from someone who's born into in poverty in for example, in a very poor country. So thinking about our position, our perspective on work based on our particular situation means that the person next to us may have a very different position, may have a very different perspective and situation, and just being aware. How does our education impact the way we feel about work? More or less educated? Is work more or less important? Is work more or less fulfilling? Gender. What about women's work and men's work? Do women and men do the same kinds of jobs in your world for what you see? Is there a big gap in gender roles for work? Is there a very low differential? Some cultures, there's very low difference. Men and women take care of children equally. They, both men and women fish, both men and women work outside the home and bring money into the home. And then in other cultures, it's very, gender roles are very clearly separated and defined, and men do this and women do this. And then again, we have a separate culture even in our own household. How did you grow up? Do you see both parents working? Did your mother work more? Maybe you come from a single parent household and you're not very familiar with gender and work perspectives. That's okay. That's okay. Just being aware of our own position. Finally, cultural norms and expectations. So Lauren Mackenzie, obviously, I come from a Scottish background, and in the Scottish culture, work is an incredibly important part of that culture. Being a hard worker is like the highest compliment that can be paid to someone. And so I come from this perspective where I try not to impose that even on myself sometimes, but certainly not on other people, their ideas of work. And I think that person has a better work-life balance than me. And, I can still be a good person and contribute to society even outside of my work hours, right? So maybe for some of you, that's not even a question, but maybe some of you who come from more similar backgrounds to me can relate to that. So in your culture, how important is work? Do people work long hours? And are they commended? Oh, they work such long hours. They slept at the office 3 nights last week. Oh, what a hard worker. Or is work-life balance more important? Like, no, they only spend 35 hours at the office, no more. They're home for dinner every night with their family. They never work on the weekends. That's more like the work-life balance that is a little more popular and common maybe in my culture in North America. Okay. Okay, so in my last section here, I'm just going to talk a little bit about identifying bias. So if you've identified bias in yourself, the next step is to identify bias in others, right? And hopefully identifying bias in the academic material, the articles, the books, the videos, the content that you are given in your coursework. So let's go back here. So, okay, so talking about identifying bias. So think about the tone. The tone means like some of the language that is chosen is a really easy way to identify the tone of the author. Are they negative or positive toward the topic? Okay. Are they the adjectives that are used, the language that is used, does it show approval or disapproval? That's probably one of the easiest ways to identify tone and to see how your author, where they're positioned on a topic, is to really look at adjectives, to look at the language. And, good writing is persuasive writing. So in North America at St. Mary's University, you will read and see a lot of material that is very persuasive, because in North America, we consider that to be good writing. So authors will not say, in my opinion, this is a great idea. They will just say, this is a great idea. And then it's up to you to say, is that really a great idea? Do I believe that? Am I going to buy this idea? So after you've looked at the language, looking at word choices to see if they're positive or negative, another way that you can look at perspective, or you can start to create this picture, this understanding, is asking yourself, what is the purpose? Are they trying to sell me something? And the answer is yes. And why? Why are they trying to sell me this idea? Why is this author, what is the importance of the topic? Why have they chosen to write about this? Good writing is persuasive writing, and this goes for your writing as well. Don't be too shy about expressing yourself strongly and clearly and persuasively, because that is good writing. Now, the next thing, we're sort of getting into more of the details, like looking at the research. How does the author support their ideas? What information do they give me? Do I have a variety of sources from good publications? Okay. Or are they relying too much on this one source that I can't really trust? Looking at how the author includes data, the kind of research they include, asking yourself, what are they missing? What am I missing? Right? We cannot believe what everyone tells us. We can't support everyone's ideas, because when those ideas conflict with each other, what do we do then? We have to start to develop our own. I agree with this author's idea on this, but I would make this adjustment using this author, and starting to and get a broader sense of what you think. Asking yourself, is this convincing? Is the author's research, is their data, is their explanation, is their language, is it convincing? Am I finding myself convinced? And the answer to that cannot always be yes. But of course, like I said, good writing is persuasive writing. So we may feel like we want to. And always asking, who is the audience? Who is this written for? Is this written for other professors of English? Is it written for researchers? Is it written for students? Is it written for a business publication? Who is the audience? That will help us to determine the purpose of the author. So here are some questions to summarize. When we are talking about critical thinking, we are talking about going past the text, going past what we're told, to ask critical questions. Who is this author? What is their perspective? What is their bias? We all have it. What's theirs? What is their tone? Is it approving? Is it disapproving? Is it positive and negative? How do I know? Where's the evidence? Looking at language specifically for this one. Asking, what is the research? How does the author support their assertion, their argument? How do they include information? Are they clear? Are they hiding anything from me? Why? What are they hiding? Why did they write this? What is the purpose? Is the purpose to convince, persuade, sell me something? Is it to entertain me? Most probably not. At university, is it to inform me? Yes. Is it to present research? Yes. But still going through the process of asking these questions. Who is the audience? Who is this for? And is it written correctly, or is it written, is it created with this group in mind? So if you have any questions, I hope that you will consider reaching out to me. We have some great resources on our website at the Writing Center at smu.ca. Please check us out. I really hope that I will see some of you at the Writing Center as the year progresses. And I really look forward to 2021. And that's it. Thank you so much for joining me with Foundations of Critical Thinking.